This is going to be a pretty difficult podcast to get through, Reuben.
I think considering the circumstances, emergency pod, a lot of news happening. I think we got to suspend the rules, go, just buck tradition and say his name.
I don't have to say. I don't have to say
Carson
guy
Wentz.
in Washington.
Say it, Dave. Say it.
Carson Wentz.
There you go. See, it wasn't that hard. It wasn't that hard. I mean,
felt weird.
How do you do an entire podcast about Carson Wentz without saying his name? I mean, you can say the guy in Washington. Now it's just getting really confusing. So, well, just for this one pod, there'll be an asterisk next to it. But starting with our next podcast, he's back to the guy in Washington.
Okay, I like that. It's a pretty wild story. This is an emergency Eagle Eye podcast with Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. We have to do this. We have to talk about it. It's a major story. It affects the Eagles. And I know some people are going to say, why are you talking about this guy? He hasn't played here in over a year. He's coming from Indianapolis. He didn't even play here last year. And I get all that. But this is a major story. I mean, this is and I can tell you the minute this trade went down, there were a bunch of people asking us immediately, when's the pod coming? When's the pod coming? Here it is.
Yeah, and look, anybody who says they don't care about Carson Wentz, you're just being disingenuous because this guy was the second pick in the draft just 6 years ago. He helped this team get to a Super Bowl just 5 years ago. He was this team's starting quarterback 2 years ago, and he was just traded 1 year ago. So he plays a convoluted and confusing and strange place in Eagles history. It's difficult to define, but it's however you classify it, it's a pretty big role. He helped this team win a championship. I mean, there's no two ways about it. Without Carson Wentz, they don't win the Super Bowl. They don't have the number one seed. So look, whatever happens in his career for the next 10 years or however long it is, he's going to be news in Philadelphia for the same reason. Ben Simmons is going to be news wherever he goes, and Donovan McNabb was news when he went to Washington and when he went to Minnesota. And it's just, I mean, we care about these people. We might not like them, but we care about what's going on with them.
Yeah, and the crazy thing with Carson is that he's 29 right now. He should still be the Eagles quarterback. He should be leading them to the playoffs every year. He should be making Pro Bowls every year. I mean, this is what they thought they had in this guy. And it wasn't that long ago. I mean, in football terms, yes, it was a while ago. 2017 is like light years away, right? Or light years behind us. But in real time, it wasn't that long ago. We were sitting here talking about Carson Wentz and how he was going to lead the new normal for the Eagles, that he was going to lead them every year to playoff runs. And the fact that here we are a few years later and he's already on his second team since then, it's pretty wild.
Yeah. Also, light years is a measurement of distance, not of time. So, try not to make that mistake. But I read a lot of science fiction when I was a kid, a lot of Isaac Asimov and that stuff. But
I'll
anyway.
have to brush up on my astrophysics degree.
It's really one of the stranger stories. When you look at his numbers in Indianapolis, I mean, they were really good. If you just look at the numbers, say this guy had a pretty good year. So there's obviously more to it than that. His numbers, even in 18 and 19, were probably better. I mean, in 2018, he had a higher passer rating than he did the Super Bowl season. He didn't play as well. And in 2019, his stats looked really good, but we know he didn't, he was very up and down. But for this year, I mean, when you look from afar, we know about the Jacksonville game and the Raiders game the week before, but there's a stretch of 12 weeks where he had the third highest passer rating in the NFL. This is a guy who, is just looking at, his game by game. I mean, he had some games there. So Miami, week 4, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Baltimore, 2 touchdowns, no picks. The next week, Houston. After that, San Francisco, both 2 touchdowns, no picks. Then he throws 3 touchdowns against the Titans, gets picked off twice. 3 touchdowns, no picks against the Jets. A touchdown, no picks against Buffalo, and and that defense puts up 30 points. I mean, week after week, he's putting up good numbers, and I'm thinking he's kind of not quite back to where he was, but he's on his way there. First year with Frank, and I mean, can a team really put this much credence on one bad loss to Jacksonville? Terrible loss, inexcusable loss, but that's one game. It tells me the fact that they were willing to get rid of him this quickly without a replacement in place, and move on from him and take a loss on the 2 trades tells me there's more to it than the play on the field. That there's other things involved. That all the stuff that we've heard for not a good teammate, not a good leader, not good in the locker room. There has to be something to all that, because you don't give up on a quarterback after 1 year when he throws 27 touchdowns and 7 interceptions if there's not more to it.
Especially that franchise. I mean, this means they're going to have a new quarterback in every single year Frank Reich has been there. If any team would be willing to overlook some things to find some continuity and stability, you'd think it will be the Colts, right? And there are going to be Washington fans that look at the numbers from him last year and talk themselves into this. But it goes beyond the numbers. It just does, because, I mean, the biggest indictment on him is that Frank Reich was willing to go along with this. I mean, Frank Reich was supposed to resurrect his career. Frank Reich was supposed to be the guy that understood him, that got the most out of him in Philly. And if he couldn't resurrect his career, I mean, what does that say about the future for this guy?
But he played so much better this year than last year. So maybe Frank did resurrect his career.
He played better at times.
Most of the time. I mean,
well, 2020 was setting the bar pretty low. He was awful.
That's true. That's true. But I mean, he completed 62.4%, which is right around his career average. 3,600 yards, 27 touchdowns, 7 picks, passer rating 94.6, which is over the league average, which is about 91. They were 9-6 with 8 days left in the season. They had won 6 out of 7, and the only loss was 38-31 down in Tampa, or at home versus Tampa. I mean, that's down the stretch. He was 6-1 going into that Raiders game. It's crazy to think that an 8-day period where you lost to the Raiders and the Jaguars, 2 teams with interim coaches, oddly enough, would make you make such a cataclysmic decision. I mean, they still won 6 out of their last 9. They were 0-3. They were 0-3, and then they were 9-6. So, they were 9-3 over a 12-game stretch with Carson Wentz starting at quarterback. He might have missed. Did he miss one of those games? No, I don't think he did. Played all those games.
He should have missed the game, but the league changed its rules.
Yeah, they did. There's something that we don't know. I mean,
there's something we don't know, but I think we know.
Yeah,
right?
I mean that's
I think
true.
we get it.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, how bad a guy must you be for, a team to give up on you after 1 year when your numbers didn't suck, for whatever you want to say. I mean, the Jacksonville game being what it was, and even the Raiders game. I mean, he was bad, but he had any turnovers, 16 out of 27. I don't know.
It almost seems silly to even look at the numbers with him, though, because it has to. You know what I mean? Like, it goes beyond that. And even aside from the numbers, there were still the moments of that 2020 player. I mean, we can even put the off the field stuff on the side for right now. There were moments when you watched him this year where you thought, "What the heck's he doing? Did he just throw that with his left hand? Like, what are you doing? Just be a normal player." And the hero ball came back at times. I can tell you from being in Indianapolis last week at the Combine, I mean, just talking to, I think I mentioned this on one of the pods last week, but you go around town, and I tell people I'm from Philly, like waiters and cab drivers, and when are you taking him back? When are you taking him back? I mean, that's the level it got to. And then to hear Chris Ballard and Frank Reich last week, I still don't know what the heck they were doing. I mean, it felt like they were tanking his value for some reason. Ultimately, they ended up getting a decent package for him, but I still don't understand what the game plan was there.
Yeah. Well, Ballard more than Reich, I think.
Yeah.
Reich at least kind of tried to pretend that he still believed in the kid. He's not a kid. Ballard didn't. Once Ballard said what he said, when we talked about this, it was over. He couldn't play for that team anymore. Um, uh, it's gonna. It's gonna be interesting. He has talent. There's ability there. But you're talking about
he's the kind of player that a coach will talk himself into. You know what I mean? Like because he possesses the arm, he has the athleticism, maybe not to the point he used to. But if you're a coach, you look at this guy and think, I can fix him. It's kind of like Sam Darnold getting traded to Carolina. Now, Carson's had a higher level of success in the league, but there were like those traits. And every coach thinks that they're going to be the guy to fix him. But at a certain point, he's 29 years old.
Yeah.
If I was a coach, he just is what he is.
If I was a coach, I'd feel that way. I feel like, I'll get him in here. We'll get him to stop, making those stupid passes and learn to live another day. Throw the ball away. We'll teach him all that, and we'll still have the positives, the playmaking, the big arm, and he's going to be our quarterback. I would believe I could do that.
Yeah.
And
the problem is the track record there is like how many coaches have failed.
Yeah,
coaches that were with him when he was a rookie. I think there are some inherent flaws in him as a player, and we've talked about this plenty before. But aside from on the field, he's not the most coachable player, and there have been signs of a lack of accountability throughout his career. And if you're going to fix those things, those are two things you can't have, right? If you're going to fix the flaws in your game, you have to be coachable and you have to be willing to accept when you've made mistakes. And those are two areas where he's never really been that great.
I agree. I agree with everything you're saying. I'm just saying that if I was a coach, I would believe I could fix him.
Good luck.
I would have that confidence in myself, and I'm sure Ron Rivera feels that way. And he's a defensive coach, but just in general, he feels that he can get him back on track. It's hard not to think of Donovan at this point. And Donovan wasn't that much older when he went to Washington. He was was he 30, 31? But
I think so.
Maybe a couple years older. He only played till he was like 33. So he was in Washington 2 years and Minnesota 1 year, but I would think it's going to go better for Carson than it went for Donovan. He only won a couple games down there. But first of all, are we correct to assume he's their starter? You're going to have him compete with,
he better be their starter.
He has to be, right?
They gave up. Let me read you the terms of the trade. This is from ESPN. The Colts in this deal get a 2022 third-round pick, a 2023 conditional third-round pick that can become a second-rounder if he plays 70% of the snaps. So it's another year watching that for at least not us this year. And then it's a pick swap in the second round. So I think from 42 to 47, they flipped second-round picks. But really, the Colts are getting a third-round pick and potentially a second-round pick for him.
So they traded a 1 and a 3 for either a 2 and a 3 or a 3 and a 3, essentially, with some other little.
Yeah. Even though, the way the picks lose value over time, but
yeah, it's amazing to me that the Eagles haven't even used that first-round pick yet. They're gonna draft a player with a first-round pick they got from the Colts for a player who's not even on the Colts anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible. I'll tell you what, Howie hit this one out of the park because there were not a lot of teams clamoring for Carson Wentz. There were not a lot of teams bidding against each other. He, to
It
get a
basically came
one,
down to the Colts last year.
yeah,
The
yeah,
Bears were out before the Colts knew they were out.
right, yeah. So to pull that off, and I mean, I'm not, I'm not sure, I'm not sure how he did. I'm not sure why the Colts gave up so much. They didn't really have to, but
I don't know why
now,
the Washington just gave up as much as they did. Do you think
yeah,
they had to give up that much?
yeah. I don't think teams were lining up like they were lining up for Russell Wilson. Certainly for this kid,
I
this
mean,
guy.
imagine trying to sell that to your fan base. You just struck out on trading for Russell Wilson. Here's Carson Wentz.
Yeah,
And that's what
yeah.
it is. That's what it is down there. They tried to get Russ. They couldn't. They pivoted and they got Wentz.
You still think you're getting points for saying pivoted, don't you? Um, yeah, I mean, they've been trying to find a quarterback for forever. I mean, you know, since Mark Reuben, I think. Oh, that reminds me. I'm going to go through the list of every quarterback. This is incredible. Who's played for both the Eagles and Washington? I don't know. I could ask you to name how many you could name, but this is ridiculous. Sonny Jurgensen, Mark Reuben, Norm Snead, Roy Zimmerman, Donovan, Tim Hasselbeck, Rodney Peete, Mark Sanchez, Casey Weldon, David Archer, Carson, and of course, can't forget Nate Sudfeld.
Oh, Suddy. We'll have to see. Maybe Carson will get flipped before he ever plays there.
Well, Casey Weldon never actually played for the Eagles, but he was drafted by the Eagles, so I put him on the list. So I'll leave Carson on the list, even if they cut him next week. It certainly adds a lot of drama to two Eagles Washington games coming up this year, and it's dramatic.
And he heads back to Indianapolis too this year.
Oh, does he?
Yeah. I gotta ask you, what kind of reception do you think he gets in Philly? It's a tough. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, they don't really announce practice squad guys. No. I mean, yeah, it's a good question. I think it'll be mixed, but mainly negative.
Do the Eagles try to trot out some video for him or something?
I would. And I would also have one for Ben Simmons tomorrow night, by the way. The guy did some good things here. He was a 3-time All-Star. I'd have about it. Take the high road on that.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, I think you know what the reaction is going to be. But with Wentz, I don't know. I mean, certainly, I think there's a definite bad taste left in everyone's mouths here. But you were right earlier. You talked about, I mean, this guy helped them win a Super Bowl. They don't do that without him. They just don't. I mean,
Yeah.
He had them playing at a super high level. He got them off to the fast start. And maybe he wouldn't have been able to finish it the way Nick Foles did. So in a weird way, maybe they don't win the Super Bowl if he doesn't get hurt. That's something we'll never know. But I honestly have a hard time believing Nick Foles would have gotten them off to that start.
I think I think they're both true. As odd as that is, I mean, without Carson starting the season, without Nick finishing the season, they don't win it. It's like having.
I will tell you, I think the more likely, if we're playing this stupid hypothetical game that I just created, the more likely scenario for them to win a championship is Carson the whole way through than it is Nick the whole way through.
That's fair. I would agree with that.
What a dumb hypothetical game I just created.
What about Nick starting the season, then getting hurt, and Carson coming in for the last few games? And the crazy thing
I've never seen him in the playoffs.
How many teams has Nick been with, since he was here? Well, I guess since he was here the second time, just Jacksonville and Chicago. Right?
Yeah.
He's also been with the Chiefs and the Rams. He's been with 5 teams. Carson's been with 3 teams, and they teamed up to win a Super Bowl. It's all just so weird. I mean, how do you think he'll play?
Okay. I mean, okay. I thought he was going to play a little bit better than he did in Indy. I really thought I was on board with the whole idea of Frank fixing him. it's hard for me to imagine anyone going to Washington and just finding a bunch of success. I don't believe in that franchise. I believe in Ron Rivera, but I don't believe in that franchise.
Yeah, I mean, it's been so long since they had any kind of success.
Real
and
success.
again, what's that?
Real success, because they've had moments.
Oh, yeah, they won
where-
a division 2 years ago.
Yeah, but
Yeah. I mean, you have to go back to Joe Gibbs the first time. But I still say that there were times last year where I really thought Carson I thought it was really clicking for him. I mean, there were extended stretches. I mean, his good moments by far outweighed his bad ones. The bad ones just were extremely ill-timed, extremely ill-advised, and extremely damaging.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of really good moments.
It's a dangerous place to be as an organization, though, holding on hope to those moments and trading away picks to get a quarterback with limitations. And look, I'm guessing their hope is that he can overcome those limitations, be the quarterback everyone once thought he was, but that doesn't happen. You know, it's very rare that happens. And at a certain point, when a guy shows you who he is, you have to believe him.
Yeah, I'm looking at their offensive coaches. Scott Turner's their O coordinator. He's got Juan Castillo down there. He's a tight ends coach. Maybe they'll sign Zach Ertz. Who's their quarterbacks coach? Let's see. Who is their quarterback? Ken Zampese is their quarterbacks coach. So he's been around a long time, respected guy. I don't know. Maybe something's wrong with me. I still think he's fixable. I still think in the right situation. I mean, maybe the realization hits him that, this might be my last chance as a starter. I mean, he'll be in the league. He's not going to, unless he retires, if it doesn't work out down there, but maybe it'll just hit him. I got to start listening to my coaches. I've got to start changing the way I play the game. This could be my last opportunity to be a regular full-time starter and lead a team. I've got to make some real changes in the way I go about my business. That's possible. You're skeptical. Dave's got a skeptical look at his face.
He's
I am
29.
Too, it's possible.
He's 29. And if Indianapolis wasn't the place to fix him, is it Washington? Washington Commanders are going to fix him?
I don't think it's likely, but I think it's possible. Yes.
Yeah, look, I don't think it's a 0%.
But I don't think it's up to that. He has to fix himself. I think it's got to come from inside. He's got to change. He's got to change the way he plays game. He's got to understand the limitations that his several injuries have, resulted in, that just don't let him play the game the same way he used to. And I think that's a good place to start. I think there's other things he's got to fix too.
And the other things are harder.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to change who he is.
He's 29.
Change who he is.
And look, I want to make it clear. I don't think he's. Let me finish. I don't think he's a bad guy. I don't. I really don't. I think there are definite character flaws that we've seen come out over the last several years. And in Philly, it was really tough because you're comparing him to Nick Foles and Jalen Hurts, who really go above and beyond if you had to list what you want in a teammate, what you want in a leader, those guys check every single box. So it's a tough deal for Carson Wentz to be compared to those guys, and he was here. But for it to not work out in another place, a place that has had such instability at quarterback, it really, it's about a bigger red flag as you can get.
I mean, Michael Vick was not a team guy in Atlanta. He was selfish. He admits this. I mean, he was, he was a me first guy. Never, he got to the playoffs and stuff, but never got to an NFC championship game. But when he got here, I mean, he was a completely different person, and there's obviously reasons for that. But he became a real team guy, unselfish, became a better quarterback than he'd ever been. You look at Randall. Randall was a selfish guy. I mean, he admitted like he didn't study. He just relied on his physical ability, and and then he retired for a year, and he came back with Billick in Minnesota and was an MVP late in his career because he kind of it clicked with him that I can't be that. I can't keep being that guy that's only concerned with myself. I've got to change the way I am. It is possible. Guys have done. That's just two examples of guys who were here. I think it's rare, but I think it does happen. And like you said, he's not a bad guy. I mean, we've been around him enough, but you can be a good guy and a bad teammate, certainly. Yeah. And I think that's the part he's got to work on.
I mean, the good news for him, I guess, with that comparison is, I mean, the closest you can get to a federal prison in the NFL is probably FedEx Field. So,
yeah, that's a good analogy. Yeah, I mean, it's a dead franchise. I mean, you just can't. Nobody wins there. But they got decent weapons. Throw a Terry McLaurin, who should be an Eagle, but yeah, I mean, I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical it's going to work out. But if I'm the Eagles, I'd rather face Taylor Heineke than Carson Wentz.
I agree with that. It's a low bar, but I'd agree with that. And I don't wish him ill, honestly. I hope he finds success in the league. It's just it's a tough sell for me. I guess if you're Washington, you're looking at the division thinking it's kind of wide open. I mean, Dallas is clearly the class of the division, but I mean, no one's won the NFC East back-to-back since the Eagles did it 15 years ago. So I guess they're looking around and saying, especially in the NFC, all the good quarterbacks are in the AFC for the most part.
Yeah.
This offseason, you saw the NFC lose Tom Brady and Russell Wilson. So it's kind of wide open. I guess that's the way they're looking at it. But I don't know, man.
Washington Eagles opener. I'm banking on it.
Where? Here
down there
would be
down there.
It'd be better up here.
Yeah, probably. But I'm sure we'll get that. I'll do my mock schedule soon.
It is going to be fun for schedule makers, though, figuring out when to put those two games. They'd normally backload those division games, but this is one that, I mean, you don't want him hurt for that game if you're the schedule makers, right? Like if you're the NFL, you want him playing in that game.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the drama. Jalen Hurts on one side, Carson Wentz on the other. Now, what if Frank Reich goes out and they end up and they make a move for Nick Foles? You imagine that? And that's not even like that. That just came to me, but that's not that wild of a thought, is it?
No. In fact, it would surprise me if that doesn't happen.
Could you imagine that? Like back-to-back weeks. What if in back-to-back weeks, Washington plays at the Link, Carson versus Jalen Hurts, and then he has to go to Indianapolis, play Frank Reich and Nick Foles. I wonder if they play the Jags.
And then they play the 49ers, so he's got to play against Trey Lance, who followed him at North Dakota State. And then they play the Jaguars. He's got to face Doug.
I'm looking up to see if they play the Jags. I mean, but I actually last week, I thought Doug said the nicest things about Carson. And it was their relationship that we had heard deteriorated so much, throughout the end of that 2020 season. But I think some of that goes away with time and when you're not around the guy. But I got the sense Doug really does want the best for him and he wishes him well.
It seemed like it, yeah. And you can tell when Doug's being disingenuous, and he wasn't.
They do play the Jaguars.
Do they?
at home. So this year he's going to face Frank Reich, he's going to face the Eagles, and he's going to face Doug Peterson.
Interesting. That's a quarter of his season right there.
And he will face the 49ers too. So he's going to see Trey Lance.
He'll either be an all-pro or this will totally break him. And that could be 5-game stretch there of those opponents.
If I might try to call a schedule maker. I don't have any schedule maker numbers, but I want to make this happen.
That's why you got to do a mock schedule. And we'll get the schedule. We usually get it, the middle of April?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's always a fun day.
There's always a fun day. That'll be the first circle on my schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one. Look, I've been doing this a long time. This is really one of the stranger stories I've ever covered, because there's so much, and I mean I don't know, I mean there's so much mystery surrounding him. I guess, so many unknowns. Like, why is this happening? I mean, has a quarterback ever been taken in the top 2 picks overall who's been with 3 teams before his 30th birthday? I mean, I'm sure it's happened. I guess Derek Carr has been with a few teams. I'm sure it's happened, but it's 3 years in a row, different teams. It's and again, I keep going back to, and I understand what you're saying about he did not play as well as his numbers, and I don't disagree with that, but his numbers don't say this is a guy that we feel is unfixable. That's what gets me, is that
I just feel like there's so much danger in looking at his numbers and being like, well, that's not bad.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's always been the case with him. That's always been the case with him. He's got that odd ability to play way worse than his numbers that nobody else.
The weird thing was, in his best season, I thought he played better than his numbers.
That's true.
Right? In 2017, the touchdowns were there. The yards weren't there. The completion percentage wasn't there. But he made these incredible plays. And maybe that's why it wasn't sustainable. But he made these incredible plays that only like 3 guys in the world could make. Maybe less than that. It was like he was making Aaron Rodgers type plays week in and week out. And you thought, this guy's going to be the greatest quarterback in team history. He's going to lead them to Super Bowls, and he's going to be a Pro Bowler, and he's going to be an All-Pro. And I am so unapologetically wrong about what he was.
But he still makes – he made a lot of wow plays last year. The difference was that he made so many bonehead plays that he didn't make in 17. To me, that's the big difference. So I guess Ron Rivera and Washington's thinking, if we can just eliminate those – the 1 or 2 plays per game that, just kind of like, what the hell are you doing? Those, like, just don't do that. We just eliminate that. Then we have a pretty good quarterback. I'm sure that's what they're thinking. That's what I would think. It's like, but like you said, I mean, he's going into what, year 7? How's that even possible? He's going to year 7. And are you really going to teach an old dog new tricks? I just don't know.
If you had to bet every penny you have right now on 2023, is he their starter? Which way would you bet?
I'd say yes.
Okay. It seems crazy that he would have another team. But does this also take Washington completely out of the mix for a quarterback in the draft?
I don't think so.
Malik Willis is there. What do they have? 10? Pick 10?
Yeah.
10 or 11?
Something like that. Yeah.
Malik Willis is there when they draft him. Gosh. I mean.
He would demand a trade before the draft was even over. Yeah. Well, he's got to develop some a thicker skin. I mean, we know that. I mean, stuff just stuff just gets to him that shouldn't get to him, that can't get to you if you're a professional athlete. You got to be wired to, you're going to get criticized, you're going to get booed, you're going to get, it's the guys that are able to deal with that who ultimately thrive, who can shrug it off. He can't do that.
You got anything else before we wrap this up?
Just one other thing. If you were going to rank the best quarterbacks in Eagles history, where would you put him?
Whew.
And how do you even go about doing that? I mean, there haven't been a lot of good ones.
Yeah. Gosh.
I mean, Randall, Jaws, Nick,
I mean, 5 is at the top of the list. And I know right after Nick won the Super Bowl, everyone wanted to put him at the top spot, and I get that. 5 is still.
I wrote that column before I even landed in Philly from Minneapolis.
Yeah,
but
I feel differently with the benefit of time. Yeah, I mean it's Donovan at the top. I guess you can put Nick too because of the peaks.
He only won like 20 games here.
I know. It's a tough deal. He had the magical season, and he had one magical run, and that was really it. I don't know how you balance. Nick screws everything up, honestly.
They both do, because they're both really hard to, I don't know where you put them. I don't know where you put any of these guys. I mean, Jaws got to a Super Bowl and made the playoffs 3 or 4 times, 4 different years. Randall made the playoffs, only won one playoff game as an Eagle, but had great one-loss rate, a great one-loss record. I feel like those guys need to be Jaws and Randall should probably be ahead of Carson.
Does it make you appreciate 5 more?
It should.
Right?
I mean, I've always appreciated him. I've always,
Maybe I meant you in a general, not you specifically, but like a general
I hope
sense.
It does. I hope people. I mean, the guy won 9 playoff games.
I mean, Donovan was really good for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if Donovan had the same, I don't know. I don't even know what to call it. The same, if he embraced the city and the fans the same way, say, Jeff Garcia did, he'd be beloved in this city.
Yeah, he lacked a certain self-awareness, still lacks a certain self-awareness. Then that hurt him for sure.
Yeah. But if you just look at the, 9 playoff games, that's, he's in the top 10 all time in playoff wins.
I'll tell you what, November 2017, you would have asked me that question, I would have said, no doubt Carson finishes at the top.
Yeah. He was on his way.
Yeah. Pretty wild.
He was on his way.
All right. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please do us a favor, rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button and subscribe there as well. Did I cut you off? Did you have one more thing?
No, I was just going to say he's the guy in Washington now.
From here on out, I hope we got it out of our system. This is just an emergency pod. We'll be back with you guys later in the week. This has been Eagle Eye. We'll talk to you soon.